You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, David.
Hey.
Wow, you're looking great, man. The summer is here. Half of the year is over. And Donald Trump and Joe Biden have just finished a debate that is probably in the books.
I'd say that one's for sure in the books forever. Yeah.
I have to say, David, I kept thinking of you while I was watching this, and I kept saying to myself, why did Joe Biden not have a few stories to tell that were coherent?
Well, he tried. I mean, he tried it a couple of times to tell stories, but he either abandoned the story or it really wasn't a story, or in that case of that girl who got murdered, it was the wrong story to tell. He told the opposite story he should have told, so not good.
It wasn't good. And you know, he's got so many handlers, and I just keep imagining the hundreds or maybe even millions of dollars of time that were spent to, quote, prepare him in Camp David. And, you know, he didn't look good to begin with. I mean, he looked like a ghost. And I kept saying to myself, is anyone like paying attention that
I get the feeling
this don't look too good?
Yeah, I got the impression too much attention had been paid, because the very next day he was at some rally, I think it was in North Carolina, where he looked and sounded great, totally coherent, totally energized, because he was actually just talking.
Right.
The debate, I got the impression he was trying so hard to get it right that he just got it all wrong. That was my impression anyway.
I mean, can you just give us 5 minutes on the stuff that you do? Because you're an expert. You know how to prepare people for major presentations. You do it with CEOs. You do it with the C-suite. You do it with more than just lawyers. And you do it so well. Just what would you have said to him? What would have been your 5 minutes? This is really the way you have to think about how you're going to capture this audience and win this election. What would you have said?
Well, I mean, okay, how I would have actually worked with him. I mean, I don't know him. I don't know what it's like to work with him for real. But I think it's what blows me away is that they don't appear to be working with him this way. What I would do is I would say, okay, we got to have like 5 really simple messages. And we just work them out and work them out and work them out until it's literally one sentence or even less than a sentence that you just always know that's going to be a message you can go to. And then you don't add to them or whatever. And then what you do is you work out, you can anticipate what the questions are going to be. It's not like it's rocket science. Any of us could have put together that list of questions. It isn't hard. They can anticipate the questions, or more or less pretty close to what the questions are going to be, and then rehearse the answers. Just simply rehearse the answers. And everybody, when I bring up something like that, they all go, oh God, no, I can't, because then it'll sound rehearsed. Then it'll be too, stiff and not real. No, it won't. No, it won't. Your brain will be able to go, bam, I know what I'm saying to this. And then of course you're going to slightly reword it. But I was watching 2 guys, and frankly, Trump was actually better at this than Biden in this debate. 2 guys just ramble, just free associate. And that's why it went so south, I think.
I have to tell you, I didn't think Trump had any content at all, but at least he looked like he was alive and well and capable, in my head, of negotiating against Putin, against Xi, against Kim. Like, these are big guys. These are tough guys. These are strong men. And I mean, want someone who will do something in a negotiation with them. And I have to tell you, I'm not a Trumpian. I didn't vote for him. I can tell you some funny stories about my mom. She voted for him. She said, I voted for him because, he won't steal. 90 years old. She always voted from, the moment she could vote. She said, he won't steal because he's so rich. And when he refused to take a salary, that gave him double points. He didn't even take a salary. She said, take a salary.
And that speaks to what I think the underlying problem with all of this is, which is that, and people don't ever want to admit this, but I'm just going to say this. Nobody actually understands what's going on in the country. Nobody really does. No one really understands what's going on with the economy. No one really understands the actual, what would go into really doing foreign policy. No one really understands the actual truth of what's going on at the border. I'm sorry, nobody actually understands this stuff. And we all kind of know.
No one understands all of them. No one understands all those issues. No. Right?
There are, I mean, I shouldn't say there are experts somewhere that get one piece of this right.
Right.
But the thing is that we all want to go on believing that, no, I have the real facts and I really know, and that guy's wrong. Well, what Trump is so good at is he makes no effort whatsoever to say true things. He just says something that sounds confident, even if it is literally the opposite of the truth, which he said a lot of those. And it doesn't make any difference because he knows no one actually understands any of this anyway. So I'm just going to say something that sounds strong. And Biden and frankly, the Democrats always make the big mistake of trying to be like, well, there's a lot of nuance and the fact isn't exactly, like that's the problem. And people go, oh, wishy-washy,
Let's do this because you said you would have had each of them, just to be neutral about this, figured out the 5 essential messages and then figured out how, I mean, they had the questions in advance. So whatever the number of questions were, it was more than 5 that mostly didn't answer the questions. I mean, Biden tried and he was overwhelmed because he looked like he couldn't remember the facts. And I kept saying, give him an index card and he could say, look, I'm going to read from an index card here because there's a lot of statistics and I can't memorize all this stuff, but I'll be honest with you, these are facts and here are the facts. And he could read from the card. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well,
let's watch this. Let's watch this for a second because I think it's worth some commentary. Let's just watch this. This is what I found online about the 5 key moments.
Child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare, going into the war.
I have to say, when I saw this, I said to my wife, Dr. Lee Suter, very smart, PhD from Stanford. She was watching with me. She was just unbelievably flummoxed by this. I said to her, Lee, I think he's going to faint. I think he's going to lose it and faint. I think he's trying to remember a script that he hasn't really memorized. He hasn't really, committed to his unconscious conscious. And he just doesn't have it. And he's fumbling badly. And Trump, of course, did the right gesture. Trump looked over him like, hey, man, do you need help? Like, I have to say, Trump was not as negative as he could have been.
Oh, well, I interpreted that look differently. I interpreted that look to mean, oh, I've won now. So I don't have to really work that hard anymore. And if that's what he thought, that's what he would have thought. He relaxed. Trump relaxed the rest of the debate. He was just like, I'm just going to sort of like, I've got the guy, he's done. He just fried himself with that answer, that one answer. Everybody will always know that answer. And I think what he started out talking about was making everybody eligible for health care or something like that. Where was he going with that? I mean,
it was a jumble. It was a word salad. It was a worse word salad that I've seen. And of course, Trump does word salads from time to time as well.
Yeah.
But that was one of the worst word salads. And I really thought he was going to faint. And I think you're right. Now on reflection, I think you're right. I think he looked over and he was probably thinking the thought bubble that went above him. Man, I just won this without even saying a word.
Yeah.
Like I just won this. And I don't really have to go very far. I mean, I could keep my mouth shut at this point. You're going to basically fall on your own sword here.
Because the whole country, I mean, I've listened to so much commentary about this debate now, and like we all are in agreement that left or right, we were watching this debate with one primary question in mind, which was, is Joe Biden capable of being the president? That is a super low bar, but that was the only thing we were like, okay, he has shown us that he's bumbling, but he's also shown us that he can really be ferocious, like in the State of the Union.
Right.
And the Democratic Party, the leaders of the party keep saying, no, trust us. Trust us. He knows he can do it. He can do it. So we're all like, well, we've seen both. We really want to see for ourselves under this kind of pressure, what does he do? And so we're like hot for this answer.
Right.
And he answers the question in the first 2 minutes.
Right.
Which is no. And I just watched most of the debate again just before talking to you here. The same thing with no commentary, just the actual debate. He looks, when you go into it, watching it, knowing that it's a failure for Biden.
Right.
If you watch it again, it isn't nearly as much of a failure on the second viewing as it was on the first viewing. And that's because the expectation was up here and got knocked down here.
Right.
He didn't need to say anything else after that because he had already lost.
It's you know what it is? It's a little bit like your point is spot on, and I hadn't thought about it. You remember when that guy Rodney King got beat up on that?
Oh, yeah.
They showed it like 20 times to the jury.
Yeah.
And they desensitized the jury so the jury was not as upset because it's like they'd seen it before. And it's like, yeah, the police are roughing this guy up. Like it became like, okay, we can kind of live with that. And I have to say, you're right. We come into this all primed. And then when, our expectations are completely dashed, it becomes such a grand slam home run for the other side. So here's the second one. Here's the second one.
Okay, yeah.
Cemetery, World War I cemetery, he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser. What?
So I have to say, I thought there was a great story there that really got fumbled because there was almost too much anger about it. I mean, there was a story to me that could be told about this guy lacks integrity and can't be chief of the armed forces because he has no respect for the armed forces. And here's why. And instead, it became almost like a personal attack, an ad hominem type of thing as opposed to a story. And you're the master of story. I was curious, how would he have played that story in your mind? Because I'm sure you could show this in some of your courses and just explain to people how to do story well, because he really did not handle that story well. It's such a powerful story.
All he needed to do, you're right. I was going to say also that, and either one of them doing a personal attack on the other guy standing on the stage is just diminishing the debate. It's diminishing the office of the president. It's like, it's this, how did we turn to this world where it's a schoolyard fight? They're talking about golf. I mean, all that stupid, idiotic, it's like, oh my, it shouldn't be about two men. It should be about two ideas, two directions for the country. And all Biden needed to do on that is not get down in the hornet's nest of did he say it or didn't he say it, which is what it ended up being, and just quietly tell the story of his son, the soldier, or some other soldier that he knows and believes in, and just tell the story of the sacrifice they made on a quiet and personal level, and look right at the camera and say it. That would have worked wonders. I mean, I don't know what story, but something like that would have diffused everything Trump was about to say. And he did the opposite. Turned and attacked him like he was 5.
Right. And I thought Biden served in some form of the service, the Navy, or maybe I'm confusing. I think
so. I think he did. Yeah.
So the story could have been, my father served in the Army in World War II. I served in the Navy in the Korean War, whatever that story was. My son served and then built in. My father was not a sucker or loser. I'm not a sucker or loser.
Yeah, the thing that I usually try to guide people to is get away from ticking off a list of things or factual things. Even saying my father served and I served, that's still kind of factual list.
Yeah.
And go into like, let me bring you into the hardest day that I ever had in the military when we were on a mission, and just go into the story of that day and the obstacle they faced and the small heroics that happen when men and women are in the armed forces and at battle. And that would be a story that he would have to rehearse in advance.
Right.
Like coming up with it on the spot would be disastrous, but that's why you rehearse it in advance and then make it look like you're coming up with it on the spot. That's
right.
what I always am trying to coach people. And it would have made a human connection. Right. And that's what he desperately needed.
I have to say, David, I think you could have helped Biden in so many ways because you have insights. And I've got to believe that team, Team Biden, is lacking your talent. Like I say that in a very respectful way, because you would probably have improved Biden by at least 1,000%. at least 1,000%. And I wonder if they are so fact-driven, list-driven, topic-driven, like essentially it's the new 21st century view that more is better. And we know that often in a simple message, less is best.
It's the cornerstone of everything I do, whether it's with businesses or with, primarily now it's a lot of lawyers, litigators and stuff. Everybody thinks that facts are going to be persuasive. And this debate, the very first answer that he gives, I can't remember exactly what the topic was now, but I just watched it again. And it's like he lists up, well, we've created, 40 million jobs and we've created 32,000 of this. And who cares? Who cares? No one can track those numbers. The numbers, when politicians, especially presidential politicians, talk about things in numbers, it's just, who cares? I mean, we have trillions of dollars and billions of dollars. We can't relate. You have to get it down to something that is not number driven, that's human driven. Some one thing happened one time that embodies the larger thrust of the point you're making that you would have been making with the numbers, and then support it after that with the numbers, after you've made the human connection.
Right. Okay, let's go to number 3.
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one. If I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. And by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag.
So this was like the worst to me. What are we watching here?
And there's such an easy answer that Biden could have, or a direction he could have gone with his answer. He could have simply said, that guy's talking about playing golf. I'm talking about running the country.
Right.
And just taken it in a different direction and been like, you know what? He can talk about his golf game. And I would have also gone into the cognitive test that Trump keeps bringing up.
Right.
Is a test that's sort of like, list back these 4 words that I just said. It's like a cognitive test for somebody who's got dementia or is like, on the other end of the spectrum, like a 5-year-old or something.
Right.
So congratulations, you passed a cognitive test for someone to see if you're alert enough to feed yourself. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
And Biden could have just gotten right, but instead he gets suckered right into it. It's sad.
It's sad. And we happen to stop exactly where I looked at the micro expression, and he's got a habit of when he's trying to remember something that he's having a hard time to remember, he closes his eyes like this, like he's trying to search his memory. He knows there's a paragraph of text that he was supposed to be able to bring up like a computer and spin like a computer executing code on a subroutine, and he can't get to it. And that micro expression was picked up by everyone I've talked to.
Yeah.
We happened to freeze it by luck. I pressed the button at the right time, and you could see it. And it repeats itself. If there was an AI program, which I think there are now, that went through all the facial features, we would see a lot of these instances where the micro expressions exactly tie to when there seems to be a sputtering. There seems to be not the flow, the Obama-like flow, the Jack Kennedy-like flow. Even Nixon had a certain degree of flow in the way he could speak.
And people have pointed this out about this debate, that when Biden was not talking, he was like looking to the side with his mouth open.
Right.
And I think probably it was an expression of astonishment at the lies that he was hearing.
Right.
That's probably what it really was.
Right.
But it read as old man and feeble. And the thing that they maybe Trump did this, but clearly Biden didn't do this. You have to also rehearse what you're going to do when you're not talking. Mm-hmm. That's something you have to practice and get used to, that weird sensation of still being the focus even when you're not talking. This is what actors have to deal with this when you're playing a part that's in the background.
Right.
It's like you can't just be letting whatever you feel come out on your face.
Right. Right.
And he was sort of doing that. So
right. So here's number 4.
The crimes that you are still charged with. And think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
So I really, I have to say, I really felt like a new low was now emerging, where two presidential candidates are essentially going after each other in areas that the country doesn't want to hear. We've heard enough about this nutty guy. I mean, this guy that gets away with so many things, and the Supreme Court is going to probably let him get away now with the most of the, quote, official acts. I mean, they left to the ruling this morning, which is like 120 pages long. I'm not even through the whole thing yet. But I have to say that, Judge Roberts is essentially giving that district judge a ton of work to figure out what was an official act versus what is an unofficial act. And I have to say that Comey Barrett said something really interesting in her concurrence. She said, I think the judge has to have discretion to let in evidence of even the official acts that color the context of what's unofficial. So this whole surgical slice and dice of the evidence, that's not the way the jury's got to hear this case. And she's pretty conservative, but she's like, you can't put that burden on judges and juries to so dissect the evidence. There's a story here. The story's got to be told. It can't just be based on some half version or half truth version of what occurred. And, in many ways, it's sort of like Trump is able to do so many things as a result of the way in which he has gotten so many breaks by the judges so far. We'll see what this DC district judge does. She's been pretty tough generally, but we'll see what she does with this ruling. I'm sure she's going to spend hours, if not days, reading this ruling left, right, and sideways to figure out how she's going to make her evidentiary rulings, because that's what it comes down to. What evidence is she going to exclude and what evidence is she going to allow? But this whole part of it was, to me, a new low. It was even worse than the golf game aspect.
So are you referring to the alley cat comment?
Yeah, like the name call. It's like name calling, right? He's an alley cat. Okay, what are you, an old man? Like, I don't know. What's the next thing that
well, I think too, to your point about the rulings of the court or the analysis that they need to do, everybody is so exhausted with that, because it's like, come on, the guy did the stuff that we saw him do with our eyes. We heard it with our ears. He did these things. And I think it's utterly exhausting and infuriating. I think this just fuels the fire of the fury in the country, that we have to slog through this ridiculous process of figuring out whether the evidence is there to support the claim and the charge. It's like, come on, he did it. I mean, that's my impression. And it feels like it's beneath the country to apply the judicial process to this, but that's, I guess, what we have to do, you know?
Right. So let's go to number 5.
We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO.
The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world.
So that was number 5. And actually, to me, that is actually the biggest worry that most people have about whoever is going to be president. We're living in a world, some people call it a segmented world, some people call it a fractionalized world. We're living in a world where it's almost a scary repetition of the way in which Nazi Germany ended up aligning with the Japanese. And of course, if you watch that great film series called The Man in the White Castle, which is just an amazing story of what if the Germans had won and what if the Japanese and the Germans had taken over the United States, the Japanese on the West Coast, the Germans on the East Coast, and what's left of the United States is a neutral zone in Colorado in the middle of the country. It's a great,
I gotta watch that. I haven't watched it. I've heard about it. Yeah.
Oh, you have to watch it, David. You have to watch it because there's so many aspects that you relate to.
Yeah.
What are the puzzle pieces that are moving around the game board? Like, what are the chess pieces that are being moved around the game board? And it does look scary to most people.
Yeah, it looks really, but it looks scary to all people, all of us. The thing is that we disagree on what's scary. And I've always, maybe call me old fashioned, but I've always looked at it like there are two routes to go, and they are two completely separate worldviews. On the one side, the worldview is we need order. We need top-down hierarchical ruler. We need it to be a king. We need it to be structure. And we're very frustrated when it's chaotic and we want to know who's in charge, and we've got a strong person up there. The other worldview says we want it to be equal. We want everybody to have a chance. We want it to be fair. And if you're on one side, the other way of doing things freaks you out on a primal level. Right. So it's not really about these guys. I've never really believed it's about which direction, which road do we want everyone to go down? And the truth is we can't all go down these two completely separate roads. And that's what's splitting the country apart, So
let me tell you something. I saw something the other night. It was the Jimmy Hoffa speech that was given to the Teamsters. It's an emulation of it in the film that's called The Irishman. It's a great film, by the way. It's called.
I've seen the Robert De Niro and
the Robert De Niro film. And his theme was solidarity. His theme was,
we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this legal bullshit and garbage they're throwing at us. We're going to get through it because Booby Kennedy wants something that doesn't mean the rich boy is going to get it. You understand what I'm saying? I don't care what he wants. He's not going to get it. He's not going to get it because we are the biggest and best and most honest union in this country. Yeah, that's right. I waited for that. Operative word I'm talking about here. Solidarity.
Solidarity.
And it works. It works for all of us. And it works for our friend here, Frank Fitzsimmons. Frank Fitzsimmons here, my executive vice president. If there's anyone that can do this job, it's this man here. And with him at my back, where are we going to go but up?
Solidarity. We have to be together. And it seemed to me that maybe the merging of those two ideologies can happen around, we do have some common enemies that we have to be really solidly together on. And whether it's Putin or whether it's Xi or whether it's something else, or maybe it's all of them, neither one of them really expressed a view that they were going to unite the country. Neither one of them. I mean, I look back and I try to remember. So what did they actually say was their plan for the next 40 years? You can't even figure it out.
Neither one of them has a plan. I think. I mean, they didn't come out and shake hands.
Right.
So
that was bad. That was bad.
Always happened in every. And maybe it didn't happen in the other Trump Biden in 2020, but that used to be a thing, and of course it used to be a thing for the one who didn't win the election to concede the election, and all that stuff seems so minor, but it's that is the image that we the people need to see. We need that story to be told to us that regardless of our differences, we are still unified. And it's not that way. I mean, the minute Trump didn't accept, well, I would even go back to George W. Bush in 2000. The minute there was dispute about the who won, and we got the sense way back in 2000 that he really shouldn't have won, that George W. Bush shouldn't have won. It was like a technicality at the Supreme Court. We started to fracture because we're like, maybe it's not together. We need mom and dad to be together, it's something like that.
Right. So, David, I'm just curious, just humor me for a second. I know this is all live. We don't rehearse this. We do it spontaneously. So tell me, no, I can't.
Like pros.
But just maybe pose this. How many hours do you imagine you would have needed to spend with Biden and maybe a video recorder to show him how he looked? Because I don't even think they showed him how he looked. But how many hours when you prep, because you do this for a living and you do it well, and I've been to some of your courses and I think they vastly improve. You do the before and after, like someone gives an opening statement at the very beginning and it's shit. And by the very end, they've gone up like 1,000-fold, like a 1,000-fold. And then they win the case and they tell you, I wouldn't have won the case without David Mann. I just wouldn't have won it. So tell me more about the process so that the audience knows kind of what you do, just generally. How many hours do you think you would have to spend with him, assuming that he was really committed to spending the time? Because I guess running the country takes a lot of time too, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the assumption, whether it's him or anybody else. If the person I'm working with isn't quite on board with the concept that we are going to talk freely about a subject for a while and then start to form it into compact little stories and a structure and then rehearse that structure.
Right.
If they're not on board with doing that, I could spend 10,000 hours and get them nowhere.
Right.
So when I work with somebody on a presentation, I'll call it a non-legal presentation, I usually do it as 5 sessions of 3 hours each.
Okay.
But it's very prescribed what they're going to do before and in between those sessions.
Right.
And then they come out of the other side with a thing that is ready to go, So if it's a case, it's a very different thing because I might be starting in the middle and I got to learn the case. It may settle, but generally anywhere between 15 and sometimes up to like 30 hours on a big case.
Okay.
We'll do it, but I can also help people in 2 hours. So
I have to tell you, and I'll say this because you're very humble and you don't sell at all. You don't even have to sell. You've got many people that call you. I have to tell you that I sometimes say to clients, they say, well, let's do a focus group, or let's do a mock jury trial, or let's do this, right? I say, well, you might be better off hiring David Mann to work with us and to even work to some degree with you, because you're the principal witness and you're going to have to testify well on direct.
Yeah.
They're like, well, who's David Mann? I said, well, he's a guy that knows how to really make people shine, and to do it based upon the facts that we have and the stories that we have and the stories that can be told and then woven together. And I have to tell you, they somehow think, oh no, but if we get these statistical people that give us and I have to say, more and more, I keep saying, forget about that. Let's look at what a gentleman like David Mann, in particular David Mann, does in his simple message approach to improve the overall gravitas of the story. And neither of these guys, in my way of thinking, had much gravitas. Neither of them.
It's not an either or. I've worked many times. I'm in the middle of 2 right now that have mock jury data. And so you go, okay, well, now that's really kind of gold to us, because we can look back and go, what did they make of that mess that you did in your clopening for your mock? They're not always a mess, but they can be, because sometimes they're spitballing and trying stuff out. I go, well, okay, so now we got a bunch of data. Now someone has to do something with that data that makes it now into a story that we're going to actually tell. And that's the missing link, usually, that piece that I'll fill in, so I can work with them too.
And just for folks to know, law schools really don't do this for young lawyers. Now, there's an exception if you join the moot court, which is an extracurricular thing, and you get the right clinical professor who really takes an interest in what David does and can actually do it. And I was in moot court, and of course, a lot of that was writing and how do you get a best brief award, and then how do you present it really well. But by and large, for like 95% of the lawyers that graduate the top, 50 law schools in the US, there's very little training. And in corporate America, in the C-suite, the business schools are similarly lacking, although they're starting to change. The business schools are starting to change. They're starting to realize that the way in which people come across in front of a group matters. And CEOs lose a lot of credibility when they fumble. And, we've got a CEO. He happens to be called president. It's President Biden in this case, but it could apply to anyone else. It would apply to Trump on some of the goofy stuff that he said during his term. And, they need to be coached. And the truth is, there should be like an office of presidential coaches or something like that.
I'm sure they've probably got people up the yin yang doing it, but it I don't know. In my experience, a lot of times there's a lot of work being done and talking being done about things, but it's not getting at the real thing. I'm starting to believe that people just don't really quite grasp the idea that you win or lose cases, business, public favor, votes. You win or lose based on how you put your information across, not what the information is. It's how it is packaged, shaped, and delivered. That's what's going to be the thing that's going to make you win or lose. And I'm like, that's a pretty basic truth that I operate from, but sometimes I have to convince people of that before we can even start,
Yeah, that's terrible. Well, David, tell people how they reach you, because sometimes people are like, well, how do I reach these people? And we put stuff in the show notes, but why don't you give them your web address and email and phone number or whatever contact information?
Yeah. So I'm David Mann. The company is Simple Message. The website is www.asimplemessage.com. And then my email is david@asimplemessage.com. And that's always the best way to get a hold of me.
Great. Hey, David, thanks for coming on. I think it's just so joyful talking to you. I get a kick out of it all the time. And this material was so rich that I said, we just have to do this. I'm so glad you did it right away, because we're right after the debate.
Topical.
It's very topical. So good seeing you. Take care.
See you too, Jack.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.